You see, it was Albert Einstein that says only a fool continues to do things the same way and expect a different result. For every rehearsal you do, there is a place to go and test whether what you are rehearsing for, whether there is result. Why do we write exams? It is actually a way of measuring your level of apprehension and comprehension over a time of diligent tutorship. It means that if a teacher is truly teaching you, the exam is a proof that actually we are making progress. And the exam will separate those who are actually catching up from those who are actually not getting the concept at all by the results of the exam. So the way to know whether you are progressing is results. The exam is where we measure results. They advise some people to repeat a class. You come to church every week. Every week you are fed by the light of God. The bread of his word is broken before you, and you eat. You fast diligently twice a week. Your prayer life continues to be jacked up by the day. Now that all this exercise is around your life, what challenge are you deliberately testing? Whether there is anything in you that is growing to surmount it. In Hebrews chapter 9 verse 4. Hebrews chapter 9 and in verse 4. Everybody, can we read together as loud as possible? 1, 2, go. Which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot. Say the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded. Say Aaron's rod. And the tables of the covenant. Say the tables of the covenant. So from these scriptures, how many things were contained inside the ark of covenant? Huh? Come on, let's participate. 3 things, right? What is the first? The second? The third? The tables of the covenant. What exactly does the ark of the covenant represent to Israel? What do they do with it? If they want actually to carry the presence of God to any situation, they just need, in the old covenant now, they just need to carry that ark with them into that. If they go to war and they want to see God's presence creating results for them, they carry that ark into the warfare. If they want to have a confidence that God and his abiding presence is with them on a matter, it is with the ark that they know that the presence of God was with them in the old covenant. However, in this ark, the ark itself will not actually have any form of relevance if you don't carefully look at the mystery that was put in place to now trap the presence of God. And it was God that diligently gave this instruction. The ark itself would have just been a box, but inside the box there are things. There are things that God instructed to be placed inside that box. One of it is the golden pot. The golden pot that contained the manna. You know what manna is? That was the food of angels that God fed the Israelites at the course of their exodus. The manna there is symbolic of divine intervention. That thing, or those seasons, or those challenges in your life that put you in a place where you do not know what the next step will be, and God somehow miraculously, supernaturally intervened and gave you a way out. The Bible says, carry those kind of events, archive it like a person who is detailed about saving history, and keep it inside the tablets of your heart. Oh, there are seasons coming, my brother. There are seasons coming when everything in your front will communicate discouragement. Everything in your front will communicate hopelessness. The only place you can find a ray of the assurance of God's abiding presence is to look back. and see how far God has brought you. Look at that night that you didn't believe you will see the next day. Look at that time you were sick on the hospital bed and everybody concluded on you. Look at how you were stranded before you paid your last rent, but somehow you paid it. Like the golden pot of manna, archive all your stories of God's divine intervention and store it somewhere in your heart. If you keep this very, very rich history of God's intervention, you and the presence of God will never be separated. Because there is something about hosting and carrying a heart of perpetual gratitude. It keeps God perpetually engaged in your situation. This is what the devil does. He is quick to remind you of the next thing that you need to begin to ask God for. This is how the average man is. You waited for God for something for long. God just did it. You summarize your testimony into 2 minutes. The moment you are coming down from the stage, the next agenda in the heart is, so Lord, remember the other reason that we were talking about since last year? If you are detailed about archiving God's divine intervention in your life, you will realize most of the times that you no longer feel anxious about anything. Because a songwriter says, count your blessings. Name them one by one, then it will surprise you. You will not even believe. Many of you, what Satan does is that he keeps your heart perpetually restless with the next anticipation. There is no time where you sat back and say, okay, for now, even though you don't do anything for me again, oh God, thank you for how far you have brought me. These are the people, this is the kind of heart that carries his presence. The golden pot of manna. What is inside your own golden pot is complaint, is anxiety, is worry. All your prayer point from January till now is about, Lord, remember you said, remember in your word. What was the last time you went before the holy altar and you just went to call him the names that you gave him in the different warfares he fought and won for you? This is the difference between us and the patriarchs of old. When God does something for them, they give God a new name and build a new altar. Then they teach their children about that new dimension of God. This is how God got all those names, from Rapha to Jireh to Ebenezer to Shalom to Shammah. Actually, all of them, they are testaments of God's visitation to different men. They archive it with an altar and bestow the name to God. A time comes when they want to bless their children, they don't talk casually. They invoke that dimension of God that their life has benefited from, and they say, may this dimension of God be with you as he has been with me. It's like dashing a man an inheritance and say, I don't have much dimension in my life, but if it is favor, I know God has favored me, so may God, the one who favors, be with you. That is how true. What did you think Jacob left home with? He left home with El Shaddai. That is the name that was secured on the covenant. And when Jacob carried El Shaddai and left home, Esau started crying. But Esau inherited all the sheep, all the land document was there, all the cattle was there, but they knew what true blessing is. It is a dimension of God that can be transferred to a generation. See what El Shaddai began to do in the life of Jacob. He entered into the house of Laban as a stranger, and El Shaddai began to prove that he is the one that multiplies, he is the one that increases, he is the one that prospers. Laban came one day and said, I know God is blessing me because of you. Can your husband look at you and say, I know that God has enlarged me because of you? Can your wife say, I know the siege of oppression ended in my life because of you? What dimension of God have you found and are you walking? Is your life a proof of any particular article? A distracted generation, always anxious, always ungrateful. You need to check, just take a break sometimes and look at the content of our average prayer. You will now understand that we are under attack. It is usually littered with complaints backed up by scriptures. You complain for 5 minutes and invoke one scripture that support that complaint. Then you now say, I know you cannot lie. Heaven and earth will pass away, but your word will not fail. And the control officers of Zion, they are just listening to you and saying, who is that one? Who is that one? Do you think God needs to prove anything again? So, for example, just follow my example. Somewhere in Kaduna, a man has found Jireh. And because of Jireh, something about God becomes announced in the territory. Somewhere in Enugu State, a man has found Rapha. And because of Rapha, now all of this is the same God, but different dimension that men have found, and they have built appreciation. What do you think building an altar represents? Even when God stopped Abraham from sacrificing his son Isaac, for that act of intervention, Abraham raised an altar. That altar, it means that even in the last minute, God still come through. So a generation that was never there to see what has happened, what they do is that they carry their seeds and their offspring, they begin to show them the way God had dealt with them before now, the golden pot of manna. Many of us don't have this in our hearts. There is no deliberate personal meditation on the testimonies of God's faithfulness. These things, you do it faithfully. You deliberately sit down sometime and say, every form of restlessness, I know that I have not brought myself this far. I know if God has not helped me, where will I be? It is of his mercies that we are not concerned. Some of you sitting here looking at me, you are a proof of God's mercy. You carry a particular dimension of the merciful God, but you have not in any way recognized that particular hand in your life. Neither can you now transfer this to your children. After the golden pot of manna, the next article in the ark is the rod of Aaron that budded. These are your dealings with God. These are the places where God did all kinds of pruning in your life. These are the process God took you through in order to bring you to alignment to his program. The dealings that God took you through, hold it dear to your heart, because out of them, that's where you find something called the fear of God. You will know that people think that you just showed up from nowhere. Only you remember nights where you cried, nights where you asked the Lord, put something upon this head and I will bring glory to your name. Only you remember when you were asking the Lord, would you not put something definite upon this destiny? How long will I labor without any result? And then somebody look at you one day because you stood, and there were all kinds of testimonies. Then they say, some people are lucky. Hold your dealings with God near your heart. Guide it, meditate on it, keep it close to you. Remember those days when even your parents did not think you can amount to anything. Hold it near your heart. Hold it. That is where his rod is. It is actually a compendium of your dealings, the process, the prunings of God. Remember the shame God took you through so that something divine can break out from your life. Remember everybody that walked out of your life. Remember people that gave up on you. Remember friends that turned their back. Remember everybody that actually concluded that what good can come out of Nazareth. Keep it near your heart. Don't let the fame of the current season ever make you inflated that you forget where God picked you from. That is the rod. That rod, if it stays in your heart perpetually, it will remain small inside your heart. Your estimation of yourself, you remain that small child before God. See what he told Saul. Were you not small in your eyes? In your own eyes, in your own estimation, were you not small? Now that I have exalted you, now that I have given you a stake, you are now so dignified that your only interest. This is the difference between Samuel and Saul, rather between David and Saul. David sinned, Saul sinned, Saul also sinned. A prophet came to both of them to rebuke them of what they have done. One person tore his raiment, put on ashes, and began to cry and ask the Lord for forgiveness. Have mercy upon me. Another person told the prophet that when we go out from this place,